And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Tuesday morning here with me in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Well, I'm going to try to keep this light, even though the only reason why I would be doing this particular episode now is because of the tragic passing, the tragic murder of Rob Reiner and his wife. And there are a number of Rob Reiner films. I recently spoke of Misery and A Few Good Men, but today I want to talk about a film where there's a little bit of a personal connection, not to the film, but one of the principal performers, and that movie is the 1989 romantic comedy, one of the standards and almost universally considered one of the 5 best romantic comedies ever made. That would be Rob Reiner's When Harry Met Sally. Now this movie it had a budget and marketing of somewhere between 15 and 20 million. The official tally is closer to 16. And it grossed $93 million worldwide, but most of that gross, this is not like Stallone where it grosses 30 in the States and 150 in Europe, as so many of his classics from the 80s and 90s. It didn't even matter. Lock Up, it didn't do well in the States, but they lined up in Europe to see Stallone. But When Harry Met Sally came out during the super competitive, and I can't stress this enough if you Google this, there are people who will say that the 1989 summer movie season in Hollywood was the most competitive, not necessarily with the best films, although there are some all-timers, but the number of legitimate blockbusters and blockbuster wannabes that didn't quite connect, it's absurd. So I'm going to forget some, but you had Tim Burton's OG Batman, right? Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which many people consider to be the best of the 5 Indiana Jones films. The James Bond film License to Kill, very underrated, Timothy Dalton's second foray. Lethal Weapon 2, enormous hit. Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, didn't do that well at the box office. Al Yankovic's UHF, Ron Howard's Parenthood, Ghostbusters 2, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Rick Moranis with literally the greatest summer in history. He was in 3 blockbusters in the same summer. Karate Kid Part 3, not that good. It's memorable mostly for Thomas Ian Griffith just chewing scenery like James Woods and William Shatner on crack, speaking of Star Trek. Use the crane, Danny boy! Well, you owe me a lot more than that, Danny boy. You're getting in that ring. But it was just one huge film after another in the summer of 1989. And then you have The Little Engine That Could, a kind of small-ish, quieter than you would expect, given the fact that it generated enormous laughs and had a lot of kind of famous exchanges between the characters. But When Harry Met Sally just got great reviews and tore it up at the box office. And you look at the kind of oddball pairing of Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan. Meg Ryan had a phase where she appeared in a lot of romantic comedies. She did French Kiss with Kevin Kline, and she was almost a sort of, You've Got Mail, of course, in the late 90s. But she was matched up with, in my opinion, guys that they were suitable for her. Inner Space, Dennis Quaid, that's not really a romantic, that's like a screwball sci-fi comedy with some action movie elements, her future husband, Dennis Quaid. But Meg's pairing with Billy Crystal, you wouldn't think that how could it possibly work? But it does. And the connection that I was talking about, Billy Crystal grew up in Long Island, the South Shore, about as far west as you can go, and you're not in, Cambria Heights, you're not in Queens yet, or Ozone Park. But it is west and south Long Island. I have family that their house was, Billy Crystal grew up next door. And when he did his Broadway show, was it 700 Sundays? I think it was called 700 Sundays. I probably got the number wrong, but that was the idea of the show, that Billy Crystal's father passed when he was very young. And he had been very close to his dad, diehard Yankee fan, grew up, being this enormous Yankee fan. Mickey Mantle was his idol. He did a great Mickey Mantle impression. But my cousin Scott is friends with Billy Crystal. He has pictures with him in his house because of this connection and the fact that My Aunt Seal gets referenced a lot in Billy Crystal's act. When he talks about Seal Weinstein, he's talking about my Aunt Seal. Now, I never met Billy Crystal, and I was not related to Aunt Seal by blood. It was on my grandmother's, my dad's mom's side of the family, the Weinsteins, Seal Weinstein, like these things all connect, right? But I was a Billy Crystal fan from even before he became a movie star because of this connection. He said, you know that guy on TV, Billy Crystal, he grew up next door to your Uncle Paul and your Aunt Seal. Really? It seemed so crazy in the pre-internet era that there could be any connection like that was not somebody just made up a story because reasons. Billy Crystal, for somebody who started as a comedian in sketch comedy, he turned out to be a pretty damn good film actor with an ability to be very empathetic at times, not afraid to play sort of heel characters. And yeah, you see him now, he's a little old guy and he's a funny guy, and he pops up in movies occasionally. He did that film with Bette Midler a number of years ago, Parental Guidance, was not that good. But he really had a certain magic on screen. And I mentioned how Meg Ryan did a lot of these romantic comedies. I mean, Billy Crystal did Forget Paris with Deborah Winger, and Deborah Winger is somebody super talented who had a reputation for being difficult, but he brought out the best in her. That movie shouldn't work, and it does. My Giant with the famous basketball player Georgie Murasan, that movie shouldn't work, and it works because of Billy. Mr. Saturday Night, he plays a very unlikable heel character as a protagonist, kind of a Don Rickles, but worse. Don Rickles was actually a great guy underneath all of the bluster and, hockey pucks all of you. Don Rickles' great moment when he was doing tribute to Martin Scorsese at the AFI. I gotta tell you, Marty, all of these classic movies everybody's talking about, none of them are any good. Billy Crystal played a guy like that in Mr. Saturday Night and just crushed it. He was disappointed there was not more Oscar buzz. But the casting of Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal in When Harry Met Sally is critical, because as much as Meg, she looked like a conventional leading lady. She was very attractive, obviously, and she just had a certain, I don't even know, it's a French word, a certain je ne sais quoi. You can't really explain why Meg Ryan was Meg Ryan. But there was something that she had that she captured at this point in time where she became a big star. She had a different energy on screen. In a similar vein to people said about Julia Roberts. There's something different with Julia Roberts, and then years later, when Renee Zellweger hit the scene, she's doing something different. I can't explain what it is, but she's not like everybody else. So Meg Ryan's first big role is a movie I love, maybe the stupid funniest film in the 80s, Armed and Dangerous, where her pairing is even weirder. She's paired up with none other than Eugene Levy, aka Jim's dad from American Pie, and one of the great sketch comics to ever come out of Canada, SCTV, working with Catherine O'Hara, working with his buddy, the late great John Candy in Splash, and Armed and Dangerous. That movie is a fucking riot. Ultimate guilty pleasure movie. Just everybody gets insulted. They don't play any favorites, like Harry Callahan. He doesn't play any favorites. But Meg Ryan, there was something that she had, and you wanted to put it into a bottle and get it out to the public. And that's what they did with When Harry Met Sally. Now, this is a film, again, I had multiple opportunities to see it in theaters, and I just didn't, because I didn't like the idea. I didn't like the idea of a romantic comedy because I had no social life. It keeps coming back to the same problem younger me had. I wasn't seeing films for very, very silly, petty, baby reasons. But When Harry Met Sally, the reviews were fantastic. And people I know who saw it, this film is great. And I don't mean other teenagers, other people in my age bracket, not just adults telling me, oh my God, this movie's amazing, you have to see it. The film, though, sets up a quandary. And the answer to it, it's up to you. And this is also not something that I thought of the first time that I watched the movie. You're supposed to think to yourself, is it possible for men and women to be friends, or will the sex part always get in the way? As Billy Crystal's character of Harry, when he first meets Meg Ryan Sally, this is one of those where it takes place in different time periods, but most of the movie is set in present day or very near adjacent to the present day. But they meet when they're in college, they meet a number of years later, and then the third time they cross paths, they become friends. But Billy Crystal's Harry who has been married, he had a shitty marriage, but he's a bit of a ladies' man, and I'm sorry, that's also something of a stretch. I didn't buy that then, and now okay, because I guess he's supposed to be like a Warren Beatty type, even though he doesn't look like Warren. He just has his way. Must have a good reputation. But he says, a man and a woman can't be friends because the sex part always gets in the way. And he's not putting a line on to Meg Ryan Sally when he says that. He's giving her a sincere reading based on his life experiences up to that point. And then he says, I'm just trying to explain, in my view, a man can't be friends with a woman a woman he finds attractive, because he's always going to be angling to get there. Again, he's not saying it with his chest puffed out. It's very matter of fact. He's simply giving a clinical, non-scientific, anecdotal opinion. And then Meg, as Sally says, okay, so you're saying it's possible for a man to be friends with a woman he doesn't find attractive, right? Actually, you pretty much want to nail them too. So the quandary the movie sets up is, can a man and woman actually really be friends? And it doesn't answer the question. It's up to you to answer the question. Based on the events of the story, is the movie saying, yes they can. Well, yes they can, but under very specific circumstances in which they're actually soulmates, in which they are meant to be together, not just be friends. And this is a film that has really great supporting performers, two people who were so great and are both gone, in Carrie Fisher and Bruno Kirby. And Carrie Fisher is pure fire in this film. She had a lot of really good stuff going on in her life. We know that she had the struggles after Star Wars. She had the drug and alcohol problems. She wrote the best-selling book, Postcards from the Edge, made into the movie with Meryl Streep, the aforementioned Dennis Quaid, and Rob Reiner as the filmmaker. I mean, Rob Reiner is the highlight of that movie as an actor, because that film was directed by Mike Nichols. But Carrie Fisher had a lot of problems, and if you want to see her do great work, and you're not familiar with this film, aside from Star Wars, this is the movie. She is just hilarious in this film. And Bruno Kirby, what a great actor he was. Remember him and Donnie Brasco? And even in Sleeper, screaming and yelling, I don't want my son doing any time. I did enough time for everyone. Fucking great. But at its heart, When Harry Met Sally, it is a legitimate attempt to explain the weird dynamic that can exist between men and women when they're in a sort of a gray area where, for example, neither one is in a relationship, neither one is married, they're not dating anyone else. They're kind of seeing this person exclusively, but they're just friends. And now, as an older person, I know that this kind of thing does happen. This is not make-believe fantasy land. This is real life. And Harry is not a likable guy. This is another role for Billy where he played a character that at certain points is a real asshole. He doesn't take women seriously. He doesn't take the concept of romance seriously. He's acting as if the AIDS crisis was not ongoing as it was, and there were plenty of people who were freaking out, but his character is bed hopping as if he's James Bond. Well, there's a franchise where men and women can't be friends. Pretty much every woman who happens upon, see, I was very careful not to say comes across, every woman who happens upon 007 ends up in bed, right? Think about how many movies he has multiple partners. And that was a big thing in the Timothy Dalton era. Are we going to allow for the fact that he really wouldn't do that because he has some impulse control? He's not just going to randomly have sex with one hot girl after another. That would have been an interesting twist if they get into the real world implications of that. But Billy Crystal's Harry has got a nice little niche going. He makes good money. Ex-wife doesn't bother him, he makes a lot of jokes about it. But he's searching for something that he hasn't found. And for all the bluster, he does want more. He just doesn't think that Sally is the person. He starts to actually believe, this woman has become my best friend. I didn't think this was possible, and yet here we are. And it's the growth of the character of Harry that makes this movie really, to me, puts it over the top. And I was identifying first time I saw this movie, I was rooting for them, even though this is all bullshit. This doesn't really happen. Always pushing aside. I don't buy this. But there's so much truth in this film. And also, sadly, we know that Rob Reiner's bride, Michelle, his second wife, he had been, of course, with Penny Marshall for many years. And I mentioned in the episode on Rob Reiner where there was so much of his life that I really didn't know. I only knew Rob Reiner in broad strokes. I knew about Penny Marshall. But, it's horrendous. If somebody had said, how many sons did Rob Reiner have? I wouldn't have been able to answer the question. How many children total? I didn't know. And that's on me. Because there are a lot of other filmmakers where I could give you chapter and verse. But all I knew from Reiner was All in the Family, and how many movies he made that I thought were fantastic. And When Harry Met Sally, objectively, it's a great film. And sometimes one moment in a great film will have people thinking, this one moment is why this movie is remembered. Jack Nicholson had two of those moments in his career. Here's Johnny from The Shining. The Shining is a lot more than, here's Johnny. And A Few Good Men is a lot more than, you can't handle the truth, Rob Reiner. Shining was Stanley Kubrick, not Rob Reiner. But When Harry Met Sally has a moment. It's a moment of emasculation for the seemingly invulnerable, although he doesn't, he's not a big guy, but Harry seems almost invulnerable. He uses women in the manner of James Bond. He uses them for his own ends, and he's perfectly fine. He's perfectly fine having one-night stands or something very close to that, or hookup partners. He's engaging in hookup culture in the 80s at a time where it was really not a great idea. But Harry and Sally are friends, and I don't know if they're in the 2nd Avenue Deli, the Carnegie Deli, Katz's, I don't remember. It's one of the big delis. And he's trying not to make it sound like he's boasting, but he is. He's explaining to Sally, because at this point they really are friends, they haven't hooked up. He's really good in bed. And to see Billy Crystal this is not the actor you would expect this from. This should be Clint Eastwood. This should be Al Pacino. Even Daniel Day-Lewis. This should be a more conventional leading man. Warren Beatty, Robert Redford. Okay. But Billy Crystal is explaining more or less how good he is. And she basically says, well, how do you know? You're taking it on faith without using this language. You're taking it on faith that the feedback you're getting from her is legitimate. I'm just saying you don't know. It could be. I'm not trying to insult you. But you actually don't know. You just don't know. And he says, well, I understand what you're saying, but a guy, you know. You feel it. Well, I'm just saying. And then she acts out a woman in the throes of ecstasy who is not in the throes of ecstasy because she's in a deli having a pastrami sandwich. And there are a lot of diners in the area who have no idea what's going on until it happened. So she acts out the run-up to an orgasm and release. Or as Jerry Seinfeld famously said, release the hounds. And after she gives this speech, and she has a very self-satisfied smirk, this is one of maybe the best moment in Meg Ryan's career, but the way that, because she's shown nothing that she was even capable of something like this until this point in the movie. And she looks at Billy, and he's bewildered, he's stunned, because now he knows, hey, maybe I'm not all that. Maybe I just had myself convinced. Maybe the reason why there are all these one-night stands is because the women are, in the immortal words of Teddy KGB, maybe they are unsatisfied. Maybe they're unsatisfied. Maybe they just wanted me to think that I knew what I was doing, and maybe I'm a fucking clown, literally. So after Meg acts out this simulated sex, simulated climax, a woman at a nearby table goes, I'll have what she's having. And that's a scene, many people who don't know this movie, they know that moment. In the manner of, they know You Can't Handle the Truth, they know Here's Johnny, and from Clint Eastwood, they know, go ahead, make my day. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk? Sound bites, quick beats. It's 2025, it's almost 2026, everything, rapido. quick hit, get out. But that scene, it does start to tilt Harry's thinking. And he slowly realizes that he's in love with Sally. And he can lie about it, he can lie to himself, but this is what's happened. And I'm going to give you a little bit of personal history, and I hope I don't put you to sleep with this. But I had something very similar happen in the mid-1990s, where I had very little in the way of a social life, no joke. I struggled, social anxiety disorder, panic disorder, all of that was real, it happened. I started to become friends with this young woman, at the same age appropriate, no jokes. We're 21. She had a boyfriend, right? Sound familiar? This is very, very normal stuff. She had a boyfriend, it was a bad relationship, but I just couldn't get out of my own way. And after months of us talking on the phone until 3 in the morning, and you could argue that that was not really kosher, I realized, hey, I think I'm in big trouble here because I want it all with you, even though I don't even know what that means because I've never been out on a date at age 21. So once that happened, once I lived that, even though I didn't exactly, I was on the business end of the negative, but then the movie worked better because this does happen. And Harry's panic at various points, you say, wait a minute, why is he panicking? The first time he says, when you realize you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody, you want the rest of your life to begin right now. It didn't hit when I watched this movie in 1990, but watching the film in 96, it did. I get it. I got it. I understood. And one of the best things that you could say about a work of art doesn't have to be cinema. It could literally be a piece of art. It could be a George Carlin stand-up routine from the 70s. It could be a Norman Lear talk show like All in the Family, with Meathead and Archie arguing politics in 1970, whatever. When your perspective of art shifts, man, that's a keeper. That's a piece of art, a piece of culture that will live forever. And this is why when people, after the idea of people being so broken up legitimately, I mean, Cary Elwes, it took him, the lead actor in The Princess Bride, I'm sorry if you don't know the name, it took him until yesterday to post about Rob Reiner. That's how devastated he is. A piece of pop culture lives forever. And when people were saying a couple of weeks ago, Rob Reiner's work will live forever, he made movies that have already stood the test of time. And you will find something new to glean each time you watch This Is Spinal Tap. Watching Stand By Me as a 13-year-old, it doesn't hit the same today. 4 times as old, if you could do the math. And When Harry Met Sally is a litmus test. This isn't something I would have ever imagined as a kid. Oh yeah, a movie could be a litmus. No. You go to a movie to be entertained. You watch a movie on HBO back in the day because you want to have a good time, you want to have a few laughs. And hey, my family knows Billy Crystal, whatever. But this movie is a litmus test for how you see this. Do you think that men and women can be friends? And no joke, in my older era, I absolutely do. There were stretches where I was very negative about everything, but I'm not anymore. And I do believe in the idea that people can just be meant, they can be meant to be together, but that doesn't mean the first time they meet that it's going to happen. This is something else that is a concept that if you haven't been exposed to, well, why would you ever even think about it? We assume 2 people meet and sparks strike sparks, right? Roll credits. But sometimes it's not the right time. And this movie argues that if Billy or if Harry and Sally had gotten together in college, it wouldn't have worked out. They would have just been bed partners. The second time, same thing. They needed to have lived, loved, and lost to go through what they went through. To start not even a tentative romance, to start a tentative friendship, which turns into best friends, to where each person is the last one the other speaks to at night, as Billy says. You're the first person I want to talk to when I wake up in the morning and the last person when I go to sleep at night. he knows there's more. And there is just such truth and reality in this film, despite the kind of down moments and the fact that Harry, for huge stretches of the film, is a bit of a heel. He's not the easiest character to like. But he is a complicated character, and you get why they cast Billy. Because he had the ability, we know, to be funny, but also the pathos. You see it on his face. When he says something, and he's just being funny, he's just being an ass because he can. And he realizes that he has hurt Sally. The way his face changes, and the way he gives her a minute to finish being angry before apologizing. Sometimes it's the pause. That's on the filmmaker. That's on Rob Reiner. Because that particular scene where he apologizes after being very insulting, another filmmaker would not have had that pause. He would have interrupted her and apologized. And the scene could still work. He's still saying, hey, I fucked up, I'm sorry. But the pause and the camera on Billy, letting us see the very expressive face of, again, a comedian, chef's kiss. It's perfect. You know, you can't do it any better. And When Harry Met Sally is one of the standards. And this is another thing that many people said about Rob Reiner. He had at least 3 movies that are the standard bearers, the North Star, as the famous screenwriter Scott Rosenberg in his post said. If people just randomly say, what do you think are some of the best coming-of-age movies? Stand By Me. What's a really good Stephen King adaptation? Misery. What's a good courtroom drama? A Few Good Men. Give me a really good romantic comedy. When Harry Met Sally. Reiner's career looks even better in reflection. And you know, I'm going to admit something else that's absurd. I didn't even know that he directed The Sure Thing. How did I not know that? I did not know that. But When Harry Met Sally shoots for the stars and succeeds. It tells so much about life, about love, about romance, about friendship, without ever being preachy, without ever talking down to the audience. Keeping it right at eye level. Feels like something could happen, and obviously does happen. Maybe not exactly in this manner. Meeting someone in college and then reconnecting. Nowadays, you meet people in college, you might not talk for 15 years and then you're best buddies because of social media. And that's also not a criticism. But this is a great film. Certainly top 5. Many would have it in the top 3 best romantic comedies ever made. Of course, I forgot Sleepless in Seattle, which is a little bit of an arch remake of An Affair to Remember, with Deborah Carr and Cary Grant, and even Love Affair a little bit later with Warren Beatty and Annette Bening, which is a drama, certainly not a comedy. But When Harry Met Sally, a fantastic film, and I guess not so much just a Rob Reiner tribute, but this would qualify for the great movie series. Not that it matters how we classify, but When Harry Met Sally, a fantastic romantic comedy, a deeply funny, deeply personal, and deeply human film about love and loss and reconnection. And maybe it will take you some time to find your person. But for all the ups and downs, it ends up being entirely worth it. Or as Timothy Olyphant says in the movie The Girl Next Door, in When Harry Met Sally, the juice is worth the squeeze. This has been episode 662 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Tuesday morning here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, I'll have what she's having. Peace.